And Nanette, you're still muted.
Okay, finally unmuted.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
Your camera's still off.
Here you go, Nanette. Just run it off my computer.
I was going to say, do you want to just come sit in here with me?
Yeah.
I'll do it on the front.
No, we can turn her camera on, Jake. It's okay.
That's been one of several problems. Yeah, this is probably safer.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. So am I on your thing or my thing?
She's on two. You
Okay,
gotta mute one of them.
let me get on. Get me. Oh my gosh. I'm the problem child. Oh. But I'm on this too, so I don't need that.
We were just testing how dedicated y'all were to find us. If you found us one time, will you find us again? You did. You all passed the test.
But yes, I got a new computer. It doesn't have a camera, so I'm using my phone and I'm sorry. I don't do technology. And whenever I push anything,
There's Caesar.
yay. There we are.
You're good.
I'm back.
That's my fault.
Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Hey, Nanette.
So I saw Lonnie got on there. We were talking a little bit about wealth building class last night, and it was super great. Micaiah filled out her personal financial sheet that you gave us for homework. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So how many people on here have a financial sheet that they fill out once a month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? Lonnie, and I can't see everybody, so if you'll holler at me, that would be better. Okay, nobody else. So that would be a good thing for everyone to practice, is to, if you need a sheet, we can share that with you. It's very simple to fill out, very easy to understand, and then you'll know where you're at as far as your financially in your lifetime. We did also touch on where we could be if we did these certain things. So come to wealth building if you can. It's very informative.
And I think what we came up with is we all want to be 25 again.
Yeah, we all want to be Silas, is what we want.
Silas has some advantages that we do not have. But yeah, time can heal a lot of wounds.
So I had a couple of odd things happen to me this week that I hadn't had happen before in my career. So, and that happens. I find that new things come in front of me and I got to figure it out. So I have a client that's MHDC, and we're almost to the closing table. And I get an email from the lender that says, I need to remove the seller's disclosure from the contract. And I'm like, what? I've never heard of this. No one's ever asked me to do that. So I called the lender to have a conversation because I don't feel like that protects my buyer. I don't think that's in my buyer's best interest to do that. So I call, she says that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are starting to look at seller's disclosures. And this particular seller's disclosure had, in the comments, everybody has cracked walls, concrete, cracks in the driveway. Everybody has cracks. So they wanted to see, I told the lender I had a structural engineer report, so they wanted to see that. And then also, so are you going to want to see every house that has cracks? Are you going to want to see their structural engineer report before you'll take the loan? And then also she had put on their rotten deck. So this is a slab house. The deck's on the ground. It's not, we've been through inspections. My buyer, we've had sewer scopes, whole home. We, virtually know everything. We did have a structural engineer come. So we virtually know everything about the house. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Nanette, we just had this come up on a house in Olathe that honestly, I was shocked. That was the first time I've ever had a lender ask us to remove the seller's disclosure. I called Darren, and Darren and I talked a little bit about it. Technically, that transaction was in Debbie's name. She was the primary agent on it. But I was just like, man, that just doesn't, this sounds off. And we felt the same way that you did, Nanette, that it was in the best interest of our buyer to not exclude the seller's disclosure. Debbie called her broker, Brenda, in Olathe, and Brenda's also the broker in Lawrence, at our Lawrence Market Center. And she said they've had it a ton in Lawrence. She was like, probably 50% of the transactions that we've done this year in Lawrence, they've had that. So I don't know if it was the lenders. I probably could get some clarification for us there. I don't know if it was the lenders or if it's the Lawrence market or if it was more just Kansas, the state. But that was the first instance that I ran into it. And we really pushed hard back on the lender and said, we're not going to remove the seller's disclosure, because then our buyer has zero protection. We're basically saying that, the sellers at that point are saying we provided the seller's disclosure and here it is. And then we rejecting it, saying that we've never seen it, right? Or we don't want to see it. If we remove it from the contract, then we have no legal recourse or anything if something was non-disclosed or if it was, purposely omitted. And Brenda said, you can take your chances. You may have to find a new lender. And the underwriting department at our lender said that they probably weren't going to be able to get the loan closed, but they would try and see if they could push it through. And when push came to shove, they actually did get the loan to close. We had to extend by 3 days. We missed closing date because it was stuck in underwriting, and they were really they were debating on if they could get it to go through. However, that was through UMortgage, and UMortgage uses, I can't remember their name, but they're kind of that national mortgage wholesaler that a lot of mortgage brokerages underwrite through. Some of you guys may know that name. I can't, like National Mortgage Underwriter Wholesaler or something. It's a big acronym. It sounds like that's going to be more and more commonplace, and we're going to be seeing that request coming down the pipeline a lot more, even in Missouri. So we ended up pushing back Nanette and said, no, we're not removing it. We got to find another lender. We felt like it was too much liability for our clients, but it also sounds like we're going to be seeing a heck of a lot more of that moving forward.
I think we are. So I'm just wanting for you guys to get a heads up, talk it over with your buyers, see what their stance is. I mean, mine is MHDC. Was yours MHDC? I don't know if
No, it was not MHDC. It was even a conventional loan. It wasn't like FHA. It was a conventional loan. And that makes me think of one other thing too. We actually did, not on this transaction in that, but on another one. We represented the seller and the buyer was conventional, and they did an in its present condition addendum, and they waived inspections. And then during the appraisal period, the underwriting department at the lender said that there was a couple of conditions on appraisal that they needed taken care of, even though it was a conventional loan. And even though the buyer had done and in its present condition, we still ended up having to take care of two things before the loan underwriting department would underwrite that. So I think I think it's just more ammunition. Like we're probably going to see a lot more collaboration have to happen with the lenders. I'm not sure where that's I don't know where the hammer's coming down on their end on if it's just tighter reins or tighter controls that they're doing. But our seller was really frustrated at that because we had a buyer that wanted to take it the way it was, and the lender wasn't able to underwrite it the way it was. We had to take care of two things.
So, this particular lender is blaming it on Freddie and Fannie. And she also said to insert somewhere on the contract, buyer has been provided the seller's disclosure. It's not a check mark. It's not in additional terms. I just wrote it off to the side where it was blank. And I inserted it through dot loop with buyer has been provided the seller's disclosure. Because I called my buyer and I said, this is how I feel, but it's totally up to you. We'd had the sewer scope. It's on a slab. He knows the deck is rotten. The roof is fairly new. There were the inspector. There were no red flags anywhere in the house. So I left it up to him and he wanted to do it. So we took the seller's disclosure. We removed the seller's disclosure.
But that was the weird part on that. Everyone on Nanette's deal, they said remove it from the checkbox at the bottom of page 2 or whatever that is. But then they also said write it back in there that the buyer has received the seller's disclosure. And if I remember right, the underwriters had already seen the contract with that box checked.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking, how will the underwriters forget that they saw the disclosure? So it puzzled me. I understand, and I think we will see it a lot more. Underwriters wanting to see like removal of disclosures or that'd be the lender, but the underwriters are going to want to see the disclosures. And I don't think it's long before the underwriters want to start seeing actual home inspections.
Yeah. So I'm just warning you guys, this particular lender said she was in a seller's disclosure nightmare right now, that this was happening more and more and more. So what's everybody's thoughts on this?
I think my biggest takeaway from our experience was, kind of like when we were in the market where people were waiving inspections, is that ultimately it's our job to provide all the information we can, and then ultimately the decision's up to our client. So I like the idea of just having, Darren put together the recommended inspections addenda for whenever our clients want to waive inspections. And we're saying, hey, these are all the inspections that we recommend, and here's why. Here's why it's a great idea to utilize the seller disclosure. Yet in the end, it sounds like, Nanette, your client wanted to move forward with the purchase anyway. I've already seen it, like if I'm the buyer, I've seen the disclosure and I still want to move forward. Great. But as long as we've communicated and we've given them all the options, if they decide to move forward, wonderful. I feel like with all of the documentation at play and signatures on it, that covers us liability wise from a fiduciary standpoint, that we've done our due diligence and we've shown them the paperwork and we have a paper trail of that. I think we're okay.
And I did run it by Darren as well. So I didn't do this on my own without consulting. But I feel uneasy about it. I don't think it's Fannie, you know, I feel like it's more the appraiser's job to find out, like I was told that I needed to provide the structural engineer report and I needed to replace the deck. Well, my seller has no money and my buyer isn't going to replace the deck. So, I just don't feel like it to me, but you know, I don't get to make the law or the rules. I'm not an underwriter, but I just don't feel like it's Freddie and Fannie's place to be going through the seller's disclosure because they have crack in their house. Because everybody does. It can be a brand new house and have cracks in it. So I feel like that's the appraiser's job to find out if there's anything that FHA is not going to cover or VA or whatever the case may be. Isn't that what their job is?
Also on that, I have a lot of people, or I've seen a lot of sellers disclosures filled out very wrong. They're like, dishwasher works, it's not plugged in. Like, how is that credible for the lenders? Like, if you gave them the structural engineer and that said it was fine, why does the seller's disclosure matter? Because I mean, it's 50-50 on, like, I take them to a point like where I believe most of it, but there's been several times where they just straight up lie on the seller's disclosure, or they don't know. So I'm curious why they would take that over the structural engineer report.
Well, I didn't send them the structural engineer report. I told them that I had one. I didn't even go there because then they wanted the deck replaced as well. And so I didn't even go to any, that stopped me sending anything to them. Because I knew the deck wasn't going to get replaced. Anybody else? What's going to happen when this is put in your lap? What are you going to do? What stance are you going to take?
Nate and Lonnie, I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Nate, any thoughts, buddy?
On these lenders requesting additional information on the properties?
They asked me to uncheck the seller's disclosure and it's no longer attached to the contract because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, it's an MHDC loan. They looked at the seller's disclosure and decided since there were cracks in the, there were cracks.
You got a loan officer saying, hey, we want to remove this from the contract because we don't want to send this up the line to the underwriters, basically, right? So
the underwriters were asking for.
And the loan officer's response was to remove it from the contract, so they have nothing to ask for.
Correct.
So to me, it's a it's a business decision. Like, so you got several different levers working at the same time. You got protecting our buyers, number one. You got us protecting our brokerage because we require a seller's disclosure on every property, right? And then to say it's not part of the contract to get funding on it, but there's no deal if you don't get funding. So what's the priority for that particular deal, right?
So also it was recommended that I add to the contract, buyer has been provided the seller's disclosure. It's just no longer attached to the contract. And,
Yeah.
and so I asked Darren about it, what his thoughts were, is that.
So Darren, what's the Missouri, commission say about that?
Because this is going to happen more and more. My lender said she's in a seller's disclosure nightmare right now. So it's going to be happening more and more. So we need to think about what stance we are going to take.
I might run it by my lender and maybe one of you guys could run it by Todd. I'll tell you my gut reaction, it kind of smells like mortgage fraud. And I don't know where to go from here, but I think it's the writing's on the wall, and I think it will be happening more and more often. And like in the Nets case, I still don't see how it changes the contract to uncheck that box, but then to write in there that the seller's disclosure has been provided to the buyer. I don't understand the difference there.
It's just not part of the contract is all it is. And if it's not part of the contract, then in my opinion, sellers can't be held liable for falsities, number one. But and then number two is I don't know. It's definitely you're trying to hide something, right?
That's my initial feeling about it.
So like, do we have any kind of a hotline or bat line to MREC or KREC?
You know, Nanette, I'll give you the number to the MAR attorney hotline, or I can call them. It used to be brokers only. Now they allow any agents to call, but it's, they've got 2 or 3 lawyers that they pay for, and we can pick their brain on different things.
So I think it's clear that Fannie and Freddie have come out with some new guidelines that they're going to be following, right? And certain lenders are adopting those guidelines sooner than others. And so I think getting a response from our real estate commissions would be a great idea. So yeah.
Because if you missed it, Tim said that he also had that happen on a conventional loan.
This
That
is lenders, yeah.
this was an MHDC one. So I felt like MHDC, yeah, I can see where they're going to be looking at it deeper. A conventional loan, that kind of surprised me when Tim said that happened to his.
Tim, do you remember who the lender was that was requiring that?
Yeah, the lender was U Mortgage, and I looked it up since I was talking. The underwriting that they use on that is through United Wholesale Mortgage out of Chicago, and they underwrite a lot of
They're big boys.
mortgages.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's where the holdup was through there. And again, we ended up just saying it was the local lender who said, I don't know if we're going to get this to fly through underwriting. And the local lender in our case was the one who was wanting to remove it from the contract. And we pushed back, and it did get hung up in underwriting at United Wholesale. And they requested more information like yours, Nanette. They requested more information from us. Essentially, they were able to push it through and get it funded, but it caused a delay in our timeline, which was, could have been crushing. It wasn't, but it could have been.
United Wholesale handles a huge for mortgage brokers in particular. They handle a large amount of that volume. So it's going to be coming up a lot more. I don't think it's going away. It's probably just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to get started. So anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Are we supposed to like coach our sellers? Like, hey, don't make a big deal out of nothing? Because they could say cracks. I mean, I've had some say cracks on the foundation wall, and they're literally just hairline little.
Absolutely, yeah.
Missouri gets hot and cold and dry and wet. Everything has cracks.
Well, I think maybe in the in the instance, and if we all coach every seller, I hope, to check the box that says there are cracks or flaws. Show me a house without a flaw or a crack. But maybe in the box below where you can explain it, have them explain it. There are, minimal hairline cracks in the concrete because concrete cracks. And, maybe an explanation, not to minimize it, but to just describe it, because the underwriters in Chicago, they're going to see the word crack and they're going to think, oh my gosh, it's, huge cracks and it's crumbling and all kinds of bad stuff.
So Micaiah said in the chat that she has one also. It's with Flat Branch, conventional loan, asked for the inspection report also, now required more work.
I saw that too, and that was the similar situation that I had up in Holt. That was a conventional loan, and they actually required us to do some things. The underwriting department looked at the appraisal, and then they came up with conditions of appraisal. The appraiser didn't. The underwriting department said, we're going to need this and this done, and they requested us to send them the inspection report, and there wasn't an inspection done. So that was super frustrating. So then we had to get an inspector out there. But honestly, like, that makes more sense to me. I can get my head around that, and I can get behind an underwriting department requesting an inspection, because if the seller's disclosure, which is part of the contract, says that the foundation has cracks in it. Well, if I'm an underwriter making a decision from my desk in Chicago about a house in Kansas City that I've never seen, and it just says it has cracks in the foundation, okay, send me some, I need more information. Send me some pictures of it. Let me see what a third-party independent inspector has to say about it, so that I can make a more informed decision on if we want to write a $290,000 or a $400,000 check for this house. That makes sense to me. But simply removing the seller's disclosure, whoever said, like, yeah, Darren, I think said, it sounds kind of like mortgage fraud. Like, it doesn't feel good when we're all doing our best to disclose information and provide as much facts about the properties as we can, only for the mortgage department to say, hey, let's get rid of that. Like, that doesn't feel good to me. What does it sucked for us, but it felt better that the mortgage company was at least like, hey, we'll loan the money, but we want to see you replace this guttering and fix this part in the roof. Cool. Like, I get it. You guys are the ones with the biggest risk here. You're putting a lot of money out and you've never seen the property. Okay, that's fair to me. I would rather see it go that direction, because then it really protects both buyers and sellers so much better than omitting things from the contract.
You're muted, Nanette. I can hear you, but I think I'm the only one. While we're waiting on Annette, instead of sending the entire inspection report, could we request and just say, hey, what are you guys needing to see, and send them that little snippet? I've gotten burned several times where I send them the whole report and they said, oh, well, now that we're looking over here, you need to fix that too, even though we didn't have any concerns about that.
I would certainly, I think that's a valid question. I would ask. They may insist on the whole thing, but I would certainly ask, or just start out by sending that one page and wait for them to ask for more.
Right.
And do we
Jake,
think go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say that's pretty much what happened on our Holt property. Was the roof was disclosed that it had some storm damage that wasn't repaired, but that they hadn't had any issues since. But there wasn't an inspection done. The buyer was okay with just taking it the way it was. I assume the buyer is probably putting a new roof on it. But the mortgage company, the underwriter, saw that in the disclosure, and they wanted that taken care of, and a damaged gutter and downspout replaced. So what we ended up doing in that case was, instead of having like a third-party inspection done on the whole property, I called JW, and Royal took aerial pictures of it. They took pictures of the damage. They did like the water test. Like, JW spent, I don't know, 2 hours just spraying water all over the roof to verify that it didn't take on water inside the house. Like, and we sent all that information to the mortgage company, and that, that was sufficient. They did tell us that we had to, pack it and get some work done, which it wasn't a big deal. But I'm with you, Jake. I don't think we send them the entire inspection report. Like, what do you want looked at? The foundation? Cool. I'm going to call Falcon Foundation and have them come out and send a specialized report on just what it is you want us to look at. Even if I had to spend a couple $100 doing that, I'd rather do that than open up a can of worms on a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, I've like screenshot and like cropped it to where it's just that one Like, this is what you asked for, 7B. That's just, because every time I send them a little more, then they have more questions.
So ultimately, I think this needs to be brought to the attention to the market center. We need to know what our stance is, how to handle this situation. Because it's coming. So everybody just, I was taken by surprise because it's never happened to me before. And I'm like, what the heck? So I'm just wanting you guys not to be caught off guard, to be to the forefront of this. And then maybe as a market center, we decide how we're going to handle the situation. So moving on to the other thing, I had someone in the office happened to be here. It was closing day for them. They just stopped me and asked me, what is your opinion? It's closing day today. For the second or third time, the buyer is wanting to extend. This person was representing the seller. The seller was distraught about it. The seller didn't want to extend. The seller wanted to go back on the market. It had taken 8 months to even get a contract on it. Virtually you're 7 days away from closing on the property. And the seller said they were going to sign the extension, but had not yet. So the contract read that closing day at 5 o'clock, that everything had to be closed. Are you out of contract at 5:01 p.m. or are you out of contract at 11:59 p.m.?
Sounds like a Darren question.
I mean, if it said 5 o'clock on the contract, 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock. I mean, I think that like on closing and possession, I love putting closing at funding, but sometimes sometimes it doesn't fund till the next day, but somebody put 5 p.m. on the day of closing. If it doesn't fund till the next day, well, you agreed to give it to them at 5 p.m. that day. So I think if closing was scheduled for 5 p.m., they wrote that in there. Otherwise it would have been, the 11:59. But if they put in 5 p.m., it's 5 p.m.
Okay.
So if you get an extension at 6 o'clock that everybody signs, is that not a valid extension?
It is, but only after everybody signs it, right? If I don't sign it and you missed closing, that's on you.
Okay.
So I pulled out a contract and I was looking at it. Unless it's specifically something else written in there, I think what I'm reading, it says closing and possession on or before, blank closing date. Seller will execute and deliver into escrow, blah, 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 blah. I think the 5 o'clock part, unless it said something different, was that on down, it says when all documents and funds have been executed and delivered into escrow with the title company or closing agent, the closing will be completed. Seller will deliver possession of the property to buyer. Most of us, personally, I like to write in at funding. But if left blank, possession will be 5 p.m. on the closing date. So it's kind of technically, I think the 11:59 might apply, but even at that point, you can't deliver. Well, I guess the closing date would be the next day by default because the title company can't do anything at, 7:30 p.m. So, but all parties signing an amendment to extend the closing date. My opinion is, what else could you do? You don't have to start the whole contract over at 8 p.m. Just get everyone to sign it to extend it a week or whatever.
Because that was then the second question from this person was, if I'm out of contract, if my seller doesn't sign by, we figured it was 5 o'clock because that's what the contract read. By 5 o'clock, we are out of contract. Do we have to start all over? And I think Darren answered and this person agreed that we didn't. We just had to sign an amendment to keep it going, that everyone agreed that we were extending, that they were extending for 7 days. And, but then this happened. This person was like sweating bullets all day. The seller could have signed at any given moment. It would have taken 2 seconds. And they waited till like 4:52 to sign it. Well, then the buyer hadn't signed it yet, because then we have to send it to that agent, and then that agent has to send it to the buyer. And so all this was going through this person's head, thinking, well, if we have to start all over and blah, blah, not knowing all of it at the time we were talking. So just wanted to clarify, if you are on closing day and you have someone that's being stubborn and not signing by the time they're supposed to, and you still have other people to sign it, then it ends up that they send it to the buyer and the buyer had been in a car accident. The buyer couldn't sign.
Well, hey, Nanette, if we back to Darren's point, if you read the contract, the closing date and the possession date are 2 separate lines on the contract. So there's a closing date. It says on or before, and it just has a date. There's no time there unless somebody wrote a time in there. You would have to add, and we're not really supposed to be adding a bunch of stuff to contracts. So you can write your amendment, and Darren, please jump in to correct me if I'm not saying it correctly, but the closing date is just that date till 11:59 p.m. It doesn't matter what time they were scheduled to close at the title company. That's not a part of the contract. But so if they have signed this amendment at 6 o'clock, 6:30, 8:30, whatever time that night, you're still good because you're still on your closing date. Now the possession, if you're going to extend, extend your possession day too. And that's where the time comes in, is on the possession line. You can't take possession till you close, right? Am I missing it?
Oh, maybe I misunderstood the initial question then. I think it's starting to click for me a little bit. But did you originally start out by saying that they've extended or they've requested to extend closing multiple times now? And this time they didn't even let you know until the day of closing? Was that right?
I believe so. If I'm understanding, I had a conversation with somebody in here, and so it just made me question, because it does say on line 226 of the contract, seller will deliver possession of the property on 8/8 at 5 o'clock if it's left blank.
But do you read the question above that? It says,
Right.
when all documents and funds have been executed. That has to happen first.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I'm following. Yeah, that was mine. So we got notified the day before closing that they wanted to extend, but it was the day of closing that my seller finally agreed, or well, she agreed the day before, but she had the document, the amendment, all day on the day of closing, and waited until 4:52 to actually get it signed. But Brand, yeah, I think I'm following Brandy. The closing documents had not, all that has to be taken care of before, of course, funding could be at least initiated, and of course possession that day.
Yeah, if it doesn't close, if there's no signing of documents, then we don't even need to worry about a possession day or time.
Right.
So that time, don't worry about that time piece. If she didn't sign it till 4:52, that's okay. She still has 7 hours left of the day, to get all the signatures you need.
I think
Yeah, that was
bigger picture wise, and I'm familiar with this case a little bit, is when we get multiple extension requests on a deal, at some point we got to ask, why the hell are we keep getting these? So, in this case, there was another deal relying on a deal and all that kind of stuff, but go to the front end deal that's causing the delay and ask, hey, you asked us for a week extension, we gave it to you. Now you're asking for another one. What makes us confident that this one's going to work if the first one didn't work? And at least you'll hear the
right.
litany of excuses. So, I think, when you weigh out these things, is it in my client's best interest to extend anything? You have to look at the overall demand of the property. Could I replace this contract quickly with an equal or better contract? Is this contract ever even going to perform? Because no matter how great the terms are you might have on a deal, the bottom line is if it's never going to close, the terms aren't that great. They're kind of overrated, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to weigh out there. And I believe in this case, we're talking about raw land. So you're not dealing with your typical possession issues and some of those sorts of things. But, always look back to what caused the delay, research that particular issue with that particular agent and or lender, and drill down and find out, okay, I get it that you needed this extra week, but what makes us confident that next Friday is going to work and we're not sitting or having the same conversation again?
Right. Right. And I had spoken to the lender on that was directly attached to my part of the transaction from the buyers. I've spoken to her several times, but with Lonnie's advice, I went back to the lender of the initial deal that had to take place in order for my buyers to be ready to close on our deal. And so I had a great conversation with that lender at like 8:30 at night. To his credit, he took my call and on his personal cell, and he explained everything to me. And his underwriting team, they asked for 6 months of interest the day before closing. But we had a great conversation, and I do feel confident. I spoke to him yesterday. I'll speak to him again today. I'm just going to be dogging this until we get to the table.
Yeah, it wasn't that David didn't have all of his ducks in a row and then he presented that to the seller. It was, here we were on closing day. She wasn't signing. There was the emotions were elevated with David. And so he's like, is it 5 o'clock that this is not going to be in contract then, or is it 11:59? And since his buyer was in a car accident, I don't even know if it got signed by 11:59. But anyway,
it was the buyer's agent, and yes, it did get signed later that evening, well before midnight rather.
So I learned something today. Thank you for clarifying, Brandy, that if they haven't signed, then the possession time is not is not valid. And so now if that ever happens again, I can coach people accordingly. But it was a great experience to try and figure out what was going to happen. And yes, you were out of contract if you did not sign the amendment that day, but everyone could still sign it after the day of closing, as long as everyone agreed to move forward and you don't have to start all over.
Yeah. And one more thing, Nanette, about that, and again, this is more Darren, but where it talks about on the possession date, I think a lot of times we get so hung up on that possession date when agents put in a date and a time of possession. But if the documents haven't been executed and delivered into escrow with the title company, if they sign the docs that day at 4 o'clock, but everything hasn't been executed and funded, do we give them possession just because the contract says 5 o'clock? I don't. That's not how I was ever trained. So something else, to think about. I don't know how y'all handle that possession date and time. I like it funding, because funding is pretty cut and dry. It's clear. It's either funded or it's not. But what if it's not funded by, Friday at 8 or 5 p.m.,
Well, the first sentence to that paragraph says, when all documents and funds have been executed and delivered into escrow with the title company, closing will be completed.
Right.
So, yeah, if you write 5 o'clock, it looks like you give them possession. Am I reading that right?
Well, no, you're the broker, so you get to say. You get to decide. That's why you get paid the big bucks for that. So, but what my question is, let's say, what if funding and possession are on the same day? I'm sorry, closing and possession are on the same day, but they close 1 hour before they're supposed to take possession. What if it's not executed and funded by then? That's my question.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I always try to write funding unless it's some, deal where the seller is taking possession for another couple of days or whatever.
Sure.
But if that's left blank, when all documents and funds have been executed and delivered into escrow with the title company, the closing will be completed. Seller will deliver possession of the property to buyer on, and then if you leave it blank, possession will be 5 o'clock. So that puts possession prior to funding. And we all know how sellers feel about not seeing that money in their account
Yeah.
and giving up.
Agreed.
I'm not giving the keys till I see see that money in my checking account. So I think
Yeah,
funding is typically the smarter play.
and I think it's important, Lisa will tell us all the time, don't have everyone close on Fridays. And I think to have them close in the morning, it helps too. So, cause they cut off around 1, I think, for wires. So I think it's kind of best practice to aim for those things too, when you're scheduling closings for your people.
Yeah. And wires are not instant. They can take hours.
Yeah.
And certain banks have kind of a intermediary. I don't know how wiring works, but
Magic.
yeah. But yeah, it can literally take hours
Yeah.
for wiring.
And if it's 3 p.m., it ain't gonna happen until the next day, if
Right.
all the paperwork's in order. So
Well, yeah, absolutely. And here's another thing. It's good to know that every bank, every mortgage company gives their authorization differently. One of the things I love about Fairway is usually the funds are there and the authorization is given before we ever show up and hit the closing table. So some banks are like that, but there are other banks and other situations where they want to see all the closing docs from the buyers and the sellers. They want to approve it one last time before they give it authorization. So that's the risk of giving away houses before they're funded. Is that the lender could at the very last minute after everything is signed say, hold up, we have a problem. And then now you've just got buyers moving into a house that they don't officially own yet. So
Yeah, I've seen that happen.
yeah, it almost happened to me one time, and it just scared the crap out of me so bad that I'm just super careful about that. They were my buyers and they moved into a house and and now I didn't give them the key. The listing agent gave them the key,
That's
and
on
told
them.
them where it was. But anyway, they moved into a house and started ripping out the flooring and the carpets in the rooms that they did. I never got funding authorization and found out the seller never signed their docs.
wow.
And it
they-
does.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brandon.
No. So I learned that just even when the seller signed the docs, we still may not be done. The buyer's lender still has to sign off on it and give authorization for funding. I was sweating it for a good day. I almost wanted to quit real estate altogether and just go, hang it up. This ain't for me. I'm out.
It'll take more than that to get you out of this business.
Well, it was not a good day for me. But
So,
yeah.
and the fact that wiring can take hours, the next paragraph in bold print says buyer must not occupy the property or place personal property in or on it prior to the completion of the closing and disbursement or availability of seller's proceeds.
Mm.
So when everything's available, it might not be in their checking account. And then it says, if any, unless otherwise agreed upon in writing by the buyer and seller. So, maybe we need to coach our sellers. There's a lot of stuff we need to coach our sellers better on. But let them know, hey, the funds are available at the title company if you want to, because if they're picking up a check, the check would be printed, but wiring can take until the next day, depending on the time of the closing. A great gauge of everything being hunky-dory is when the front desk sends us an email that says, we have received a commission check on 123 Main Street. Well, if we get paid, that means it's done. And the seller's funds are also available.
Yeah. This is good stuff, guys. Knowing the contracts, knowing what they say, details matter, words matter. This is good.
Yeah, it's probably not anyone that is regularly in this group, but we have a whole heck of a lot of agents that don't know what our contract says. And it frustrates me. And I get it. We sometimes forget where something is and we can't find it. And somebody calls and says, asks me a question about something. And I'm like, well, that's in the contract. Look through, I may say something like, I think it's on page 6 or whatever, but that's clearly stated in the contract. And if we don't know what the damn thing says, we should.
Good stuff.
I've got a dealing with an issue that I'd love some advice on the last few minutes, if that's okay. So to make a long story short, help buyers, they closed. Water department came out that day to discovered there is not a water meter on the house. Lonnie, Darren, my dad, every agent I've talked to, it's never seen that. So that's always not fun. But the water was on, so we were able to do inspections, do all that, but no water meter. It was remodeled. I guess they took it out, which is illegal, but whatever. Sellers agreed to put one back in. The agent argued with me for 20 minutes about how their seller's not responsible, but then they agreed to do it. But it's been like 4 weeks, and they were going to meet the city out there, and then they no-showed, and then they ghosted everybody for a week, including their agent, and then it's kind of working with us and trying to get it done now. But just at what point do you guys kind of cross the line for legal action on how long to take before? Because they agreed to do it, but it's been 3.5, 4 weeks, and we have a spot marked in the yard as of yesterday. But other than that, it's been they're not motivated to do it, but agreed to. So I've been trying not to push on them, like be aggressive, because I don't want them to, especially if they feel like they're not required to. But I don't know. Been struggling with getting it done. So I don't know if anybody has any advice there.
That's a fun one. I remember talking to you about that.
Yeah.
Was that in writing? Was that, what's that? It was?
I have a text that the agent, in text I have that me and the agent discussing the seller doing it and that they have not yet, but there wasn't. But it was after closing. So yeah, nothing in contract or on a contract or anything.
No, because that agent is not the seller that is saying,
Yeah.
I'll put it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, weird deal.
Yeah.
Is there an expense to the seller?
Yeah. They're doing it themselves, but yeah, they gotta, they basically have to prep it they don't install the meter, but they have to prep it. So they have to basically dig down to the water line outside, run a couple pipes up, put in whatchamacallit, not a well, but whatever to access it.
Sleeve
So,
or whatever.
yeah.
Well, and the city had notified them, the sellers multiple times about it, so they were aware it wasn't there and that it was required to be there, right?
They said they aren't. That's the main thing. If they're like, yeah, we're for sure responsible, then a letter from a lawyer would motivate them. But I think they feel as their agents told them they're not responsible, but they are willing to do it. So it's been kind of, I don't know.
But didn't the city tell them they needed to have that and that they were trying to get that done when they owned the property?
They said the city didn't tell them anything. That's the main reason I haven't pushed as hard legally is because they feel like they're not obligated. They're just doing it out of the kindness of their hearts, except they're not doing it. So
It's a weird one.
yeah.
It's his cousin too, so the client is his cousin, so it's not like some stranger he never has to see again.
So
I may have missed
typically
it. So the house doesn't have any water?
It has water. No, water's on. They've been using water, but there's no meter.
Yeah, it had an inside meter previously, right?
Yeah, it's an old home, so it's probably an inside meter. They removed it at some point during remodeling, and water was on. That's why, inspectors don't check to see if there is a meter, since it's illegal to remove it. But yeah, it's been and the city's not going to really pursue anything with anybody because, it was flipped, so it's not like they used enough water for the city to care. But the city basically told my clients they could have a month, and then they're shutting the water off, and we're coming up on that.
So typically, with utilities, we tend, my background in planning, typically you see the city responsibility to the meter, and then the user's responsibility from the meter to the home is typically what we see, or what I've seen for most municipalities from that kind of stuff. Just to kind of give you an idea on what it looks like.
Yeah, that's the issue is just them not doing the work they agreed to do. They know now. We know how they met with the city. The city's on board. They just the sellers haven't done it, and I don't know how to force them to.
Might have to call
Probably.
Apex.
Probably a carefully worded letter from an attorney.
Yeah, my fear is that may not be enough, but maybe. And then my clients are without water. The main goal is, of course, is to just get it done. But okay.
Is the city gonna charge for the actual meter?
No, it doesn't. I don't believe so. From what I've talked to them about, it doesn't sound like it that they do that. It's just because they can call it an upgrade or whatever. Because I think they'd swapped out a lot of meters in this area anyway, just to upgrade them. So it doesn't sound like there will be a charge for that.
Hope not.
But so we'll send the bill to the seller. But then, yeah, okay, well, that's kind of what I was thinking, everybody. So we'll see what happens.
Well, it's 11 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for joining and participating. And I hope this brings some awareness to your business.
Thanks, Nanette.
Thank you, Nanette.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, guys.